Bonjour les élèves. Today we're going to talk about les verbes en RE, or verbs that end in RE. So let's take a second to review. Remember, in French there are actually 3 categories of regular verbs in French, one of which we've already learned, les verbes qui finissent en ER. So these would be the ER verbs that we've learned and been using for a while here. So here's a list of les verbes en ER, regular ER verbs that we've learned. You'll remember we have parler, which is to speak, étudier, which is to study, travailler, to work, aimer, to like or to love, chanter, to sing, and nager, to swim. Now these are all the infinitives of these verbs, but you'll remember that if we want to use them in sentences, it's necessary for us to conjugate them. When we conjugate ER verbs, you'll remember you drop the ER and you replace that ER with the appropriate ending that corresponds with each of the subject pronouns. So let's take a second to review those endings before we move on and learn our new category of verbs. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and fill this chart in with you. If you'll remember, when je is our subject, we drop the ER and we end that verb with the letter E. That's why so often we've had sentences like j'aime chanter, where we just wrote the letter E on the end of j'aime. The terminaison, or the ending that goes with tu, is es. Il, elle, or on, e. So you drop the ER and you replace it with e. Nous, the ending is ons. For vous, the terminaison est ez. Remember that is pronounced like an A sound. And then for il and el pluriel, we have t, which remember is silent. But that is the ending that you use when your subject is third person plural. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a second to learn our new category of verbs, les verbes qui finissent en RE, or RE verbs. When we use les verbes en RE in sentences, conjugating them is exactly the same. First, you find the stem, which you would do by dropping the RE ending, and then for each of the subject pronouns, there is a corresponding ending. However, the endings for RE verbs are different than the endings for ER verbs. So write a chart in your notes like you see here, and let's write down the endings that go with each of the subject pronouns for RE verbs. And you'll notice they're different, but some of them are actually kind of the same. Alright, so if our subject is je, the ending that we're going to replace with the RE with is the letter S. For tu, it's also going to be the letter S. And I'd like to point out that both in the je form and the tu form, that letter S is silent. You know that. You know that you don't pronounce S's at the end of French words. So you won't do that for RE verbs either. Now, if your subject is il, elle, or on, you actually just use the stem. So there isn't actually an ending that you add in place of the RE for RE verbs in the third person singular. So I don't know what you want to put in this spot in the chart. I don't know if you want to put an X or if you want to write down there's no ending, but you'll just use the stem when your subject is il, elle, or on. When your subject is nous, you'll replace that RE with O and S, with vous, Z, so these look kind of familiar. And with il and el pluriel, again, and te, just like with ER verbs. That and te is also silent for les verbes en RE. However, I would like to point out that that E and T tells you to actually pronounce the consonant that goes in front of it. Alright, so let's take a second to look at some examples of RE verbs. There aren't as many examples of RE verbs as there are ER verbs. So the first one we're going to look at is the verb attendre. Attendre means to wait for. So we're going to use attendre in a sentence to say, like, I am waiting for. To conjugate the verb attendre, we would drop that RE. So the stem of the verb attendre would be whatever you have left over without that RE. So if we were going to use this with the subject je, here's our stem, and then our ending that goes with the je is the letter S. So I'd say j'attends, I am waiting. Another example of an RE verb is perdre. Perdre, to lose. Descendre, Descendre is to go down, to descend. It's often used also like to deboard a plane or a train. Rendre is to return something, so like returning a book or a paper or a pencil. Entendre is to hear, where écouter is to listen to, entendre is to hear. Vendre is to sell. Répondre, to answer. Looks like respond. So répondre is like to respond to or to answer. I would also like to point out with the verb répondre, it's often always followed by the word à. So répondre à mon professeur or répondre aux questions. So often you'll see that with the word à following it. And then also rendre visite, à, where in this expression rendre is the verb. Visite doesn't change. And rendre visite means to pay a visit to someone. Okay, so let's take a look at the verb vendre, to sell, and let's fill out the verb chart for the verb vendre so we can see this verb in action here, and you can see what it looks like in all of the different forms. Alright, so let's fill out. So our stem for the verb vendre is V-E-N-D, whatever we have left over without the R-E. So let's write our stem here in the je form. And then the ending that goes with the je is S. So to say I sell or I am selling would be je vends. The tu form is exactly the same word. Tu vends. Notice that S is silent. To say he or she or one sells, it would also sound like vend, just like the je form and the tu form, but it would just be the stem, il vend. That D is also silent because remember the rule, you don't pronounce consonants at the end of French words. The nous form, to say we are selling or we sell would be nous vendons. So there's our stem and the O and S ending, nous vendons. To say you all sell or you all are selling, vous vendez. And then to say they sell or they are selling, it would be pronounced ils vendent. The E and T is silent, but we do pronounce the letter D that comes before that E and T ending. So ils vendent. So there's a difference. To say he is selling, il vend. To say they are selling, ils vendent, where you pronounce that D. Okay, so that does it for les verbes in RE. I would like to also point out, if you look at that list of RE verbs, all of them end in the letter D in the stem. So that's a good thing to note or write down, that RE verbs all have the letter D before that RE. And so their stem is going to all end in the letter D. Okay, that does it for les verbes in RE. Au revoir les élèves.